Hey everybody, it's Tuesday night, but I am going to prepare a little video for you. This video is going to sub out for a class that we are doing next week on a nonprofit life cycle because I need to be at an all-day ASU training and I could not figure out how to give you this and also how to be over there. So this is what we're doing. And we're going to talk today about the nonprofit life cycle. So if you think about the life of a person, you have a baby and they need lots of caretaking, they're not self-sufficient, they can't talk, etc. And then that kid gets to be about 2 years old and we think of the kid as precious, but being in the terrible twos. Simon, sorry, hang on, I'm going to pause and go get my dog. Okay, hopefully we won't be disturbed again. No guarantees though. So I was saying, you have a 2-year-old and we think of the twos as the terrible twos. And then, you could go on through each stage of a person's life. We would get to the teen years where teens are trying to explore who they really are and maybe they're pushing back a little bit against their parents or other authority figures. And we kind of expect that because that's what teenagers do, and so on and so forth. Well, just as people have life cycles, also organizations have life cycles. And the reason to understand organizational life cycles is, there's actually a couple really good reasons. The first is because if you are thinking about building an organization, which we are all in this class building fake organizations, then thinking about where we are in the process of building the organization, which is right at the startup, you would want to know what to expect and how to plan and how to act and how to maximize your organization's chance for not only success, but just survival. And the other reason is because sometimes organizations have problems. Sorry, getting another dog biscuit. Sometimes organizations have problems, and what we want to know is this a normal problem for the stage that the organization is in? Because if it is, then we can look to see other organizations who have been through this, and we can figure out how to help our organization through it based on life cycle advice. Just like there are lots of books written on how to handle 2-year-olds and teenagers, similarly speaking, there is a lot of information available to help nonprofits through certain stages of their life. On the other hand, if we can see that something is not normal for the stage that it is in, then we need to really worry about what's going on with the organization and we need to look more deeply. So that makes the idea of a nonprofit's stage of life or place in its life cycle a good diagnostic tool. All right, well, let's get started. So here are the stages of a life cycle. We have the startup. And we have the period where after we've gotten everything together, the idea, we're kind of launched off the ground, we're growing. And growing means that there, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what you're doing, there's a need for the organization. Other people see it, you're getting the support you need, but you can't get all your needs met easily. You're still struggling maybe to find money or maybe to hire enough people or maybe to make the relationships you need to make everything work. Growth is kind of like an uphill thing. And so it's a time of a lot of activity, intense activity. Maturity is when everybody around you in your area, maybe you're working in teen education or something, everybody recognizes you as an authority. You've been at it for a while. You've proven that you are doing a good job. People think of you as credible. And although you may have some ups and downs, the things that you need are mostly in place. You have some kind of system of fundraising. You have a pretty good sized staff to carry your work out, or even if you're an all volunteer organization, you've done a great job of organizing volunteers and coordinating them so that you know that you have them available. You have partners in the community who look to you for your expertise and support you when you need it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so then what happens, the maturity state can last for a very long time. If you think of an organization like Catholic Charities or something, it's been around a very long time, considered a very mature, well thought of organization, could last for a very long time. On the other hand, something can change. An organization can go into stagnation or worse. Stagnation is basically where an organization has been doing things the way it's always done things for so long, but the world is taking off in a different direction, and the organization is not turning with the world to keep pace. And sometimes when an organization has institutionalized certain practices or ways of doing things, it's very reluctant to make change. People are very invested in how they do things. And when that happens, an organization becomes less and less relevant in its field, and it becomes stagnant. At some point, that stagnation can create a situation where the organization is going to become less relevant in the work that it does. Funders are not going to be as interested in it anymore, and they're going to turn away. And at that point, the organization, the people running it, have to make a decision. Are we going to just let go of this organization? Are we going to get a grip and turn it around and make it relevant again? So let's talk in more detail about each of these phases of an organization's life cycle. Okay, so stage one, the startup. We have no formal organization yet, but we have a great idea and we feel passionate. We feel compelled to carry this idea out. We just know it's going to meet a need, and we can see how much better it's going to make life for whomever we're going to be serving, and we want to do it. All right, so this is great. We have this passion. We want to do it, but what do we have to do to actually start up an organization? The challenges here are we have to figure out, are we really going to be meeting an unmet need? And we might, I mean, is the thing that we've identified really where the need is, and can we meet it? If we do our research, which is for you guys in your fake organization, is the research I've asked you to do for your section B, and you feel that you have figured out where that unmet need is and the right way to reach it, then it's time to develop a mission and a vision statement. And we're going to talk more about the mission and the vision statement, or actually I think we will have just talked about it, so I won't go too deeply into it here. And once you get a mission and a vision statement, you need to use them to mobilize others to your cause, because you probably can't do anything by yourself. You're either going to need volunteers, or you're going to need funding, you're going to need some partners, or all of that. So that is the next challenge. And then converting your idea into an action plan. And usually you want to pull your main players, the people that are going to help you do this together, and you want to talk through what the action plan should be, how much you should try to bite off in the first little bit of your organization's life. What are the building blocks that need to be in place first, so that as you grow the organization, it will have the foundation that it needs and it won't falter. So these are the things that you have to think about when you get your idea. They're the very first things to think about. All right, now you've got all that in place, and you're really in the middle of this startup, and you've got this unbridled passion and energy, but you don't have governance structure, you don't have management hierarchies or methods, processes in place. You may not have your resources or systems to actualize. Okay, so now what you need to do, you've got this plan, you've got some partners, some people. You need to actually share your vision. You need to sell not only your idea and who you're trying to help, but why this way that you want to move forward is the right way to move forward, and what all the details are. You've got to bring on board everybody who's working with you around this vision that you have. And you have to learn to say no at this point because you can't take on too much. As I said a minute ago, you need to get the building blocks in place first. Now, at this stage of the game, if you can hire somebody, and even if you're just finding volunteers, it's really important to find people who are willing to lick envelopes but are also capable of being very articulate and raising money or whatever. The people you hire need to be very versatile. Sometimes you won't hire anybody yet. The board needs to be both board members and staff doing the work and also making the policy decisions for the organization. But if you are lucky enough to have the resources to hire staff, in the beginning, an organization is not going to be able to hire too many staff. So you want to make sure that the ones that you hire are willing to do everything and smart enough to figure out what they don't know. All right, this is still a time when you are continuing to find outside support and partners, but going along with this idea of knowing when to say no, you need to live within your financial means. You don't want to bankrupt yourself before you're off the ground. Okay, stage 3, this is it, growth. Here we have our mission. We have started developing our programs. We've got some staff or some volunteers. But we're finding that our ideas are actually so good that we've got more demand for our services than we can possibly meet. So this is a stage where everybody goes crazy. There's way too much to do in too little time. You're usually totally understaffed because you're still growing your resources. You're trying not to say no to the people who need you, even though you're supposed to know when to say no. You need to help at this point develop more fully the board's sense of ownership. They really can't be there at this point anymore just to advise you, or even if they're a working board, just be hands on deck. At this point, they need to start flipping into those outside activities that board members are so good at. They need to help you find resources, whether those are partners or funds, and they need to be your ambassadors out into the community talking up the work that you're doing so that people know that you are active and alive and doing a good job and will come in and help you. At this stage, you're going to need to start putting in some structures. If you don't have structures in place, as you grow, things can become chaotic. At the same time, and by structures I might mean accounting structures or programmatic structures, training structures for new volunteers, any kind of structure that helps you have a consistent quality of everything that you're doing, some kind of quality control that it will be done well and right and on a timely basis. But even while you are busy in this growth stage, building yourself some structures, you need to still stay kind of creative and flexible the way you were when you were just starting up, because you're still in a growth phase. Stuff is coming at you. A lot of it's still new. You need to be able to shift gears a little bit if something happens that was unexpected. You need to be creative and be able to, jerry-rig a solution to a problem you didn't know was coming. So this is kind of a tension between trying to formalize some structures to be more consistent and efficient and effective, and at the same time not losing that sort of swing from the trees, seat of your pants creativity. All right, stage 3, this growth stage, is also a time when you have to think about how the world sees you. And by that, I am talking about what niche do they see you filling and what is your brand. Now, hopefully you figured out your niche, even if you didn't actually brand yourself, way back when you were doing your research, and you know exactly why you're doing the thing you're doing and how it is filling a gap that was unfilled toward serving the whatever sector you're trying to serve. But it's time for you to frame that message and put it out there to the public so that you begin to have a reputation as a specialist in what you do. And oftentimes at this point you will bring in somebody who is very knowledgeable about branding who can help you do that. Whether it's an organization, like an advertising agency that agrees to do it for you pro bono for no money, or you find the money to pay them, it's still a good idea to set this up right, because you don't want to find out you did it wrong and then have to go back and change all of your branding. It's both expensive and confusing to the people that are watching you. Okay, so I've already said you're trying to formalize, but you still have to be able to work on the fly. You're going to have to be comfortable with change. Things in the growth stage, as you grow, things are added to your workload, and they're added to the way the people that, lots of new people to interact with, new partners, whatever. You're just, every time you bring in another partner, you have another voice talking about how best to do things. And you have to just be comfortable with change. Okay, so revenues and managing cash flow are things that you're going to have to be thinking about at this period too. At this time, hopefully you have got some fundraising plans going. They're not just ideas anymore, they're going. That's how you are funding your growth. While you're thinking about funding your growth, you probably should be thinking about where else could you get money. Maybe you started with one angel donor. Maybe you started with a government contract. Maybe you've been holding one fundraiser a year at the holidays, but you're growing, you're going to need more money, and you don't want to be trapped with only one funding source in case something bad happens. You might have a angel donor who passes away and their children do not want to support to the extent or maybe at all your organization. They have their own ideas about where they want to put their philanthropic dollars. And that happens, I hate to tell you, more times than not. So you want to have multiple sources of revenue, and the growth stage is the time to start working on that. Okay, here we are, stage 4, maturity. We're good at what we do. We do it very smoothly. Everybody knows we are good at it. They look to us for advice in our area. They know we are relevant in the discussion. If we talk, people listen, and we're good at what we do. Our quality is consistent, and we get results. Still, life isn't that easy all the way around. It's easier than it was in the startup and growth stage, but there are things that have to happen at this stage that are painful. One of the big ones is transitioning a board that's been all hands-on and had their ideas, but also participating as almost as staff members, and had their hands in everything, and consequently got very controlling. This is a time when, if they haven't already morphed into a more traditional board that just handles governance issues, then this is the time when they need to do that. And we'll talk a lot about what a traditional board is and is not supposed to do. But by the time you are in a mature state, if you haven't gotten there, this is the time to change over. When I say on this slide, stay client-centered while concretizing policies, what I mean is, again, this tension between structure and, in this case, mission. So you want to continue to be more structured so that everybody knows who you are, what they can expect. There's consistency in your approach. You don't treat one set of beneficiaries or clients one way and then accidentally treat another set a different way. By the same token, while you are putting all these policies into place, maybe you're putting employment, an employment handbook together, whatever. While you're doing all that kind of stuff, you still need to stay in the reason. Why are we here? Who are we serving? And you have to be asking yourself, is everything we're doing done in alignment with our mission? Is it going to continue to serve the people we are here to serve? At this point, also, it's a good time to begin building financial reserves. I don't know if anybody's ever said to you that you should put away 3 months worth of money or 6 months of money, so in case something happened and you didn't have any money, or you lost your job or something like that, you didn't get your financial aid, you would have the ability to keep doing what you are doing for a few months' time while you look for a replacement source of money. Well, Financial trauma can happen to organizations too. Lots of things can happen. You can lose a funder. And as I said, it happens, unfortunately, too often, more often than you would hope. You could have gotten a grant over and over again, and then some year the granting agency could decide they wanted to switch up what they do with their money a little bit. Something bad could happen. You could have a big piece of equipment like a printer or something like that just goes kaput, and suddenly you would need thousands of dollars to replace it, or I suppose you could rent it. But the point is, you need to begin to build financial reserves just the way you would for yourself. Organizations do, in fact, legally put away money. Just because you bring in, a lot of money or a certain amount of money doesn't mean you have to spend it all. You can redirect some portion of it over to reserves for the safety of the organization, and hence the safety preserving the mission. So it's all very valid. Okay, so what does this mean, maintain programmatic relevance and edge? Remember when I said that some organizations get to stagnation because, the way of doing things, the best practices are changing, but an organization is so stuck in the way that they do something that they don't also change with new understanding of best practices? Your organization should not be like that. You should stay up on all of the best practices in your own industry. You should be thinking about how to incorporate them into your own work, maybe adjusting programs to reflect those best practices, or even booting bad old practices in favor of something that is new. You want to maintain your edge and your relevance so that you can maintain your credibility and your funding sources. And then finally, at this stage of the game, usually the people who started up the organization, the founders, in the beginning, people think of the organization and the founders in the same breath. And they think that if the founders went away, the organization would go away. And often that is true. That's what happens. And sometimes very old organizations do not change that even when they get very mature. They're very reliant on the people who started them up. And then even an old, important organization will fall apart when the founder goes. A mature organization needs to actually set up a plan for succession for the founders, so that when the founder retires, the organization and its good works can continue to go. I'll tell you a story of a real organization that folded after, 20 or 30 years. There's a woman, she's still alive. Her name was Janet Arnold, and Janet is a theater person, and she always wanted to open a theater company. And she did, in fact, open a theater company. She happened to be Jewish, and she likes community theater. And the Phoenix community did not have a Jewish theater company. And so Janet aspired to do that. And she organized her organization, and she organized a board. But basically, through the years, she did not utilize her board to their fullest capacity. And she and her board did not plan for what would happen when she was going to retire. And so really the whole organization was Janet. And when the board came in, they just listened to what Janet told them about what was going on. They gave a little money every year personally. They bought tickets to the plays, and occasionally they would help her with the project, but mostly Janet was the person who ran the organization. I think she had a couple of part-time staff. When Janet was ready to retire, the organization was not ready to step in behind her and retain the theater. And it was very sad because they had a huge following, and people loved the theater, but there was nobody prepared to run it. There was nobody who really knew what all the operations were or where the agreements had been made and that sort of thing. So when Janet retired, they retired the theater company with her. And that is a thing you can avoid by establishing an identity that is independent of the founder, and maturity is the time to do it. Okay, so let's go on to decline and stagnation. As I mentioned, this is when we're not really that relevant to the marketplace anymore. Our programs might not be best practices, and when that happens, people don't want to fund us anymore. Sometimes an organization will just keep going because institutions tend to perpetuate themselves without really looking at how well they are or are not keeping up with other organizations with best practices, whether they are more involved in keeping themselves alive or doing their mission. The challenge at this stage, when you have this stagnation or this decline in relevance, is to decide whether you're going to keep going or close down. For starters, if you decide you're going to keep going, you need to reconnect with your community of need. You have to go back in and almost do your research, section B, over again to make sure that the changes that have happened out there are fully understood so that you can reflect them in your turnaround organization. You need to actually discard programs that are not good anymore, no matter how much people enjoy doing them. A lot of times somebody who's been doing a program for a long time doesn't really want to stop doing it, but if it's not bringing the value that other alternative programs can bring, then people won't want to fund it, and it shouldn't be there. You have to go back to being creative, kind of the way you were in the startup phase. In fact, you're almost restarting your business, and you have to bring some of those skills back to the table. You have to keep board members engaged. And I would say that what happens is sometimes board members stay for a long time, maybe even too long, and they get comfortable doing things the way they've always done them. At this point in time, the board members have to recommit themselves to the kind of activity that happened around a startup. And if they don't have it in them to do that, then basically new board members with energy need to be brought in, and old board members who are not willing to do that work probably need to be asked to step down, however gently. It's always a painful thing, but there are ways to do that that lead to the board members making their own decision to jump off. Usually what happens is once you've decided you're going to keep the organization alive by doing kind of a turnaround and going back to being a startup and re-energizing yourself, when the board, through the executive director or a facilitator, goes through what this all means and all of the work that's going to have to be done, and what other roles and competencies and skill sets they're going to need on their board to do that, when the board members see all of that, the ones who are tired say, oh, I think I've done my service, and they just step off. They don't want to have to rev themselves up like that. Sometimes, though, bringing in a few new board members actually re-energizes old board members, especially if they have history with the organization and they're proud of it. Bringing new people on makes them want to talk about how wonderful the organization is and all the things that they've done, and it re-energizes a board. So that's another option. Okay, so you're back to raising money to make sure that your reserves aren't depleted and that you have whatever money you need to engage your community around your kind of rebirth, regeneration. And because you're going sort of back to the startup, you want to remember startups should be lean. Mature organizations are not that lean. So you're going to re-examine your budget and get rid of anything that isn't necessary right now. You're going to go back to your building blocks to rebuild your organization in a new direction. Okay, so this is what we've been talking about, is the turnaround. And as I said, that's usually what happens if an organization has gotten stagnant and they want to be relevant again, but it can also be spawned by a crisis and a board that's decided to take a decisive action to make itself more relevant. So some of the things that you can do to successfully ensure the success of a turnaround are to find a champion, somebody who really believes in the turnaround and is willing to take on the project and run with it. Sometimes that's a board president or somebody inside the organization that's high up enough to command that kind of respect and has the authority to push things forward. Okay, so along with the champion, a turnaround culture and mindset needs to be established. You may recall that I mentioned the kind of person that has been doing their job the way they've been doing it all along, and they really don't want to change. Those kind of people do not have a turnaround culture or mindset, and they need to go. And usually it's a restructuring or reorganization, and we're talking employees, not board members here. And so they're just asked, they're just basically told that their job is being restructured, and they're given some kind of time until they have to leave, maybe a severance package depending on the financial wherewithal of the organization at the moment in time. So whenever you're trying to change up things and improve things and make big changes, it's painful and difficult even when everybody does have the mindset. And one of the things that is absolutely necessary to make it work is a commitment to frank and open conversation, dialogue about what we're doing, why we're doing it, stopping every time something unexpected happens to discuss how this impacts and if it changes our plan, and from time to time assessing to see how we're doing. We're going to need, again, to cut expenditures to be realistic, to live within our budget and our ability to raise money where we are. And then we're going to have to do a lot of talking out there, particularly board members as ambassadors of the organization are going to have to go to our partners, our funders, our beneficiaries and clients, and basically renew our credibility by talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why we're sure we're going to succeed, and rebuilding those relationships. So what if we decide that we're just not going to go to all that trouble? Sometimes that happens, okay? So there are times when, for one reason or another, the organization has lost its will and is going to close its doors. I just told you a story about the Jewish theater company that did, in fact, decide to do that. When that happens, there are right ways and wrong ways to close down an organization. The right ways to close down an organization require you to do the things that show respect for your cause, for your stakeholders, for your past funders and beneficiaries, and to be very responsible about how you terminate. So you're not just going to walk out and close the doors. You're going to, look at your financial situation, pay off all your bills, close down your bank account. You're going to try to maintain your dignity as you walk out the door. You're going to try not to be throwing blame at each other for why this happened. You're going to communicate your plans as clearly as you can to people who are your past clients or beneficiaries of your services, and to the extent that it's possible and that you can. You want to help people that you've been helping find other services. Now, if it's a theater company, they can find their own other theater, but say you've been serving autistic families through education and training, you probably want to put together some kind of information about other organizations in your area that do the same thing and share that with your clients. You don't want to leave them in the lurch, and that's what I mean about respectfully and with dignity closing down your doors. All right, you guys, I'm pretty sure that's my last slide. That's too much. So I'm just going to go right back here and show you the picture again. This is basically the visual, and that is that's the life cycle of an organization conversation. You can listen to this again if you need it later in the semester. When it's time for the exam, you will find that life cycle questions are on here, so you might want to download the PowerPoint or this video for future reference, I will put both things online. All right, everybody, thank you for your 35 minutes of attention. I know it was kind of a long lecture, but it's a short class today, and I will see you on Friday.